It was never promised the life here on earth would be easy, but let's go on this journey together. You're listening to From Hurt to Hope. All right, welcome back to the podcast, everybody. So excited that you are here. So I am bringing you a brand new guest to the show, and I hope that his story will touch your heart as much as it has touched mine. This is one of my people. This is the guy that I will be around, and a smile will come to my face, and I instantly feel inspired. And I hope that you're able to connect with him. He has just changed my life. So this is Tim Heath. How are you?
I am doing well. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. We're
Good.
here.
Good.
Obviously, life was throwing some curveballs and was trying to prevent this from happening. But when there's a word to share, we got to be here, right?
Amen. That's right.
Yeah. So Tim and I have known each other for a few years, and there's a whole backstory to that. But I want to introduce you guys to him, like off of a clean slate, and not give too much of a backstory to it, because he has a journey that some people would look at and just wonder, how do you get up every day with your radiant smile? And I think of that all the time. And I don't think this part of your story you've shared too much, but here on the podcast, we talk about the hard things, the stuff that's supposed to knock the wind out of our sails, that is supposed to give us no reason to keep pushing forward. And you are just one of those people who have this light and you just keep shining. So I cannot wait for everybody to get to know you. Who is Tim? Tell us about you. What are you all about? Where are you from? What's life like for you?
Okay, excellent. Well, first off, thank you so much for having me on this program. Like you said, I haven't told this part of my journey much to many people, and I guess maybe to the few that I've spoken it to, they've told me how much it has helped them to put things in perspective, right? Especially just the things that we tend to get caught up in and focused on in life. They found the story to help them to remember what's truly important in terms of our existence as people here. But so, as you said, sort of to give a little background of myself, Tim Heath, and I am from Akron, Ohio. As they refer to out there, the AK Rowdy. It's just LeBron James' home, and same neighborhood, actually, the west side of Akron. And I am the son of a preacher, an elder of the church, and myself, now an elder of our local church in Euclid, Ohio. The son of also my dear mother, who, growing up, she was singing in the choir and serving on the usher board and in healthcare, and dad as sort of a technical designer, sort of an engineering position in Barberton. And I say that because having both of my parents in the home and the environment in which I grew up was key. It was probably the most important thing that has sort of shaped me as a man, the man I am today, outside of my faith, which we'll touch on a little bit later. But having two loving parents who really stress the importance of education, the importance of compassion, the importance of understanding and patience, and all of these virtues, right, that we find biblically, just in a practical setting. And so I am truly and forever will be grateful for the upbringing that I had with my mom and dad. So that's Reggie Heath and Deborah Heath. So shout out to them. There's five of us. I have an older brother. He's the oldest. I have three sisters, and I am fourth born. And have a beautiful niece, Alexis, and just a very loving family. We're all close to each other. We all would just do anything for each other. And again, I think I'm pretty sure that goes back to our upbringing and love and compassion and faith and just really good a moral environment in which we were raised. So Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So you were raised in a home that your parents were involved in ministry. And is
Mm-hmm.
that when your relationship with God started, or did it take a little time to, grow into that? Or how did your story evolve there?
Yeah, great question. So when you're born and raised in the church, I think there's a plus and a minus to that. And I'll start with the minus. The negative part of that is that you don't really know anything outside of that environment. You are, in a sense, you're sheltered spiritually. You're sheltered in this community where you see everything through this church lens, right? And so then when you go into the world, you're like, oh wow, there's so much, there's so much more. Um, I guess the minus of that is that you don't really, the other part of that is that you don't really appreciate all that you are being given, all the lessons that you're learning early on, that a lot of people, they don't find out until they're at their lowest point, right? And they're brought back through these lessons that I learned about Noah, when I was 5, 6, 7. I learned about Moses. I learned about Job. I learned about all these characters and David slaying Goliath. And I learned about all these things that I took for granted. And it wasn't until later when I had so that sort of ties into the plus, because I had the knowledge already, and I didn't have to sort of relearn that, but I did have to relearn a relationship, if that makes any sense. I had the knowledge without the relationship. And I think that's true of a lot of people who are brought up in the church, is that they hit that point where that knowledge transforms into a relationship, and that knowledge is put to the test, right? And reveals whether or not you truly believe what you have read, what you speak, what you sing, what you preach, what you teach. And those words become more than just black print on a white piece of paper in a book, but they become, as the Greek word for living word is, the rhema. It becomes that living word, and it's now alive in us. So.
Absolutely. So, I think the biggest thing that you said was that relationship eventually evolves. I
Mm-hmm.
feel like it starts out like we're told these stories, and until you get to a season in your life where you have to plug that stuff in and start using it, that relationship just kind of isn't there. But you had quite the story. You started in a pretty traditional career, outside of school and everything like that, and then it led you down this road to just not being happy. Do you want to share a little bit about that
Mm-hmm.
season of life?
Yeah, for sure, for sure. So, I mean, I was like everyone, in the rat race, right? Trying to climb the corporate ladder. I had pretty decent jobs, I would say, after I obtained my master's in public health at the University of Akron. Went on to work for a company out in Indianapolis and was doing some health coaching there, mainly telephonically. Did some training as well, trained incoming health coaches. And I just got to a point to where I got bored. I felt like within maybe 6 months, I sort of outgrew the position, was hitting all the numbers that I set for myself, and even upper level management had realized this. And so they were working with another company down in Texas to create this sort of joint position for me. And long story short, I'm going to skip over some of the details of that, but that didn't work out. And I was already at a place mentally where I was ready to go. I was ready for something else. I was praying to God for more responsibility, for more upward mobility, and I wanted something that would really test me. And so when the other position didn't work out in Texas, God opened the door. And I say God opened the door, even though when I got there, it seemed like a mess. But God opened the door for another company, same position, pretty much the identical position back in Ohio. And so it was like, I was away from Ohio for about 2 years, 2.5 years in Indianapolis. And I didn't even want to come back to Ohio. And I really didn't. So what you'll find, a recurring theme within this story, this journey of mine, is that I'm always being brought back to Ohio, and I don't know why. And I'm trying to get almost as far away as I can, and then I just keep being brought back, right? I mean, Jonah, Nineveh, right? So I found this position, applied, got the position, and then that's what brought me to the Norwalk area. And so I worked as a wellness coordinator, and the increase was almost 100% increase of what I was making in Indianapolis. So I'm like, okay, that's awesome. Cost of living is lower here. The pay is higher. This seems like a dream job. And as we all know, appearances can be deceiving, right? I did my best. I was working long hours every single day, and it just wasn't, the atmosphere was such that it wasn't one that was positive. It was a very toxic work environment. And so I ended up within a year resigning from that. I'd worked for 4 years in human resources. And so I interviewed executives, and so I knew all the do's and don'ts of being in a career. And I knew one big don't was like, you do not stay at a company less than 2 years, because that next company that goes to interview you is going to say, oh, nope, red flag. This is a job hopper. And they're not going to want to invest in hiring you and training you, because they feel like, okay, well, you'll be there. Who knows if something else comes flowing down the wind and, in the wind, and you're going to be off to that next brighter thing. I didn't, at that point, it was so toxic. I didn't care. And I said, I have to get out of here. I have to get out of this place. I had another job actually lined up, which was almost another, it was more than 100% increase from my Indianapolis job. So salary wise, I'm like, man, this is looking better and better and better. And so I was excited, right? I was excited for more responsibility. My boss, or would-be boss, he was in DC. My position would have been at the Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, a 2-person team. And he's like, look, I don't hover. I'm not a helicopter boss. I believe you're the professionals. So I give you an assignment. He said, you won't really even hear from me unless there's an issue. And I respected that, it's that mutual respect. So what happened was, about a week before I was supposed to start this new job, and I had already submitted my 2 weeks notice to the current job in Ohio, I heard that the position had been rescinded, that the government rescinded the position. So for the first time in my life, I was unemployed. And so that was something that I was not used to. I've been instilled with a great work ethic from my parents, that you don't look for handouts, which plays into my story later. You don't, essentially ask for help. You work, you make it happen. You put in the work to get what you need, to get what you want. And I'm sitting here unemployed, like, oh my goodness, like, what do I do, right? What do I do? And so my first inclination was to start applying for jobs again, right? And so I started applying for jobs right within the industry that I'm in, and things that I'm familiar with, things I've done in the past. All I kept seeing was, at the time, it wasn't really a good time for jobs, but I kept seeing health coaching jobs. And I'm like, I took a moment to really analyze whether or not I wanted to do that. And I realized that at that time, you know what? You were bored within 6 months in Indianapolis. Why put yourself through this again for a paycheck? I mean, it was at that moment where I decided to, take one of my business ideas off the shelf. I had 2 of them. One was art and one was fitness. And I'm glad I didn't go the art route, because I probably wouldn't have worked out too well. And so I chose to launch a fitness business, and which started with boot camp classes and some personal training in Norwalk, since I was living here. That just grew.
Absolutely. And that's how we met. And I just love hearing the backstory of how you got from Akron and to Norwalk. I don't know if I knew all those details before. And you just know when there's just something that's not right about a workplace and an environment, and when you're really not supposed to be there. And I am thankful that you made it, and you made it to Norwalk. And that's how I got to know Tim, is because I signed up and I participated in his workout programs and his trainings and everything. And you bring an energy to it. It's unique and it's different. and you were here for several years. I guess the first time you were
Hmm.
in the area.
Right.
And then I think the biggest thing, that a message that just needs to be shared is just because you're a Christian and because you even have this relationship, it doesn't mean that it's all rainbows and butterflies. That's how I
That's right.
always say it.
Hmm.
It gets hard, right?
Hmm.
And I think people think, well, you have this like shield around you that means nothing bad will ever happen to you. But that's not
Right.
the case. And
That's
you
right.
went through a season
I
that
did.
hurt. That was
It hurt. It hurt a
that was
lot.
hard. So once you got
Yes.
here, you
Yes.
started the personal training and
Hmm.
then things kind of changed. It took you to a different location. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. So about 2.5 years after opening my own facility, I under sort of this was sort of the beginning of that season, right? This was the beginning of the season of learning. And I was just sort of this is something it's kind of hard to share because I know some of the people who will be watching and listening to this are sort of directly involved in terms of being past clients and people that I've trained. And I was pretty open with them, with the members of my gym, about why I was closing. And I told them, I said, it's too much of a financial strain to keep this going. And I didn't have any investors. There were no other people that were paying into it, essentially, no other owners. It was just me. And it was a very tough decision because it was like I was abandoning my baby. And I don't have any kids, yet. And so that's something that it was such a strong piece of me that I put 16 to 18 hours in of work every single day to just get away from that and say, you know what, I have to close this gym down. I have to walk away from this family of people who I've seen every day, who have become my friends in this area, because not being from here. I didn't know anyone. I didn't really know anyone here
Mhm.
before coming here. And so everyone that became a friend, they were either a client or associated with a client in this area. And it was hard to walk away. And so, but I made that decision to do so. And it took me down to Florida. It took me down to Florida, and people said, well, why Florida? And I really, at the time, it was because I said, I'm young, I'm single, I don't have anything tying me to Ohio, and I've always loved Florida. And it was basically one of those things where do you want to live? Where do
Mhm.
you want to move? I'm like, okay, beaches. We think of Florida, beautiful beaches, beautiful people, um, opportunities, right? That's where I went. I went to Florida, and I stayed with a friend. I stayed with a friend in Central Florida, and when I got there, I could start to see things sort of decline for me personally, not in terms of my spirit, not in terms of my emotion, but in terms of my finances. And I'm like, what is going on? Because I moved down here to actually grow my businesses, to grow my competition team, to grow my fitness, my online training, and the opposite happened. So while I was down there, I was losing online clients. I wasn't able to really break into that Florida competition training because it was so congested. There were so many people doing that in the area. And things just continued to, break down to the point to where I said, okay, I need money, and I need money quick. So what can I do quickly to make some quick money? Well, legally, obviously. And I went to a local gym and was basically hired that same day as a trainer. And so I'm like, okay, here we go. We're going to build this clientele up. We're going to get some competition training clients out of this, and I'll be all right. And I wasn't. I wasn't all right. I was training very quickly. My schedule started. I don't know what it is about me in 5 a.m., but I was working, training clients down in, I can't get away from this, like getting up at 4 a.m. for no reason, but my schedule started at 5 a.m. and I was basically training clients all the way until about 4 p.m. And then I would teach a boot camp class down there in Florida. And it was fun because most of my clients were Brazilian. And I got to the point to where I could count and teach part of the class in Portuguese, and part of it in English. And so I was like using words interchangeably because they were teaching me, you know, and they would just joke like, I'm like, oh, no fácil, you know, which means, you know, difficult, you know. And they say, oh, muito fácil, you know, very hard. I'm like, no, you know, so we were just, it was a good experience, a great experience. And I just learned a lot. But while I was there, like I said, financially, things just started to break down. There was a moment where my rock bottom essentially was when in that area, now I had moved away from where my friend was. Okay. So people say, well, you can always go back to a friend's house and always go back home to Ohio, which I didn't want to do. I was in another area about 3 hours away from where my friend was, you know, so this is where I was training, and I was basically living out of my car. I was living out of my car until I could find a place to live. And, you know, if you know anything about Florida, you know about the rent and you know about the price of things, especially on the coast, that it's tough. It's very different from places in Ohio. And I found that with what I was bringing in financially, I could not afford to live anywhere. I could not afford to. So what I was doing was initially I was living in hotels, you know, and that it's not really a smart financial decision or investment long term. And so I got to the point to where I was living in my car. And one night, I still remember to this day, this was one of the hardest nights I've ever gone through, that in the middle of the night, across the street from the gym, I'm asleep in my car. And this was probably 2 a.m. And my car is rammed from the back, like wakes me up, right? And initially I'm like, what is going on, right? Who is trying to break into my car, you know? And at that moment, I looked back and realized what was going on, and that it was like a little tow truck. You know, my car was being repossessed in the middle of the night, and I had nowhere to go. And so at that moment, I'm thinking like, okay, homeless shelter. I'm thinking like, okay, and my dear parents, and I still talk to them every day during all of this. And, you know, they're just like, come home, just come home, you know? And I'm like, everything logically said, come home, right? Just come home. But I'm like, I can't. I have to get out of this. Like, I have to go through this. And I'm not sure why, but I have to. I felt this peace and in the midst of this, right? So I grabbed what was essential and in my mind, what could still make me money. I grabbed my laptop and I grabbed my camera and I grabbed a bag of clothes and I left everything else in that car. And I said, okay, well, the laptop, you know, I could still work online, and the camera, maybe I can book some photo shoots. I'd done a few, and I had my clothes with me on my back. And so that was the first night that I actually slept outside, because I didn't have the money to, you know, at that moment, sleep in a hotel. For the first time in my life, I'm like, man, I'm homeless, right? Like I felt that. I felt homeless. And that was just, wow. That was it. That was that point where, okay, what do you do? How do you get back up from this point, from this place that you're in, right? How do you go forward? And it was, so many things happened. So many things. I mean, this podcast, this could really be like a 2 hour, but we're not going to make it that long, because there's so many stories that happened during that time. And I would go and I wasn't unemployed. I was just homeless, and I had a job. I had a couple of jobs. I was online training. It was not for lack of trying. Believe me, I applied to probably 200 jobs while I was in Florida, and I got 0 calls back. I was like, oh my God, what is this? Like, this makes no sense. Someone who's worked in human resources, who used to help other people write resumes and cover letters, who knows how to interview, right? Who's interviewed executives of the, you know, I mean, and so I'm like, what what is this for? And why do I feel stuck right now? Right. And I just, I went into work, I went into the gym every day, and that was where I showered. I showered there. Um, when I could afford it, I was basically making enough money each day at the gym to stay in a hotel that night. And I'm like, well, that gets you nowhere. That's existing, that and surviving. That's not living.
Mm-hmm.
I was making just enough during the day to get a hotel at night at that point, but it wasn't much else left. There was no discretionary income. There was nothing to go out and have fun with, right? So it was the gym, hotel, every day, and without a vehicle.
You were surrounded by people in the gym
Yeah.
every
Uh-huh.
day, but you
Yeah.
probably felt lonely because you weren't telling clients. I, assume that you weren't telling them
Well, right.
how
And
things
that's,
were.
and they didn't realize it because the same sort of energy, the same up upbeat attitude, the
Yeah,
same positivity, right? Like this smile,
that
like
smile.
I would bring this to the gym every day in this situation,
Mm.
right? No house, no car, a bag of clothes, walk into the laundromat. Thank the Lord that things were like within a decent radius from the gym, and my laptop and my camera. That was it. And so I just every day I would go in there. I'm having fun with clients. I'm dancing with some of the older ones while I'm training them, and they wouldn't have had a clue. And I think I told maybe one, and they were floored. They were floored, and then offered for me to stay with them. But I didn't want to get into that because that was just so, it still didn't feel right.
Mhm.
Right. And so I'm still trying to, I'm saying, I'm trying to make it, I'm going to make it. And that being said, it taught me, this situation taught me a lot because it taught me to receive blessings from other people. Like I said early on, I was taught that you work hard. If you want to get out of something, you work hard for it. Well, there's certain times where your hard work, it doesn't matter, right? In a sense of, if you have to be taught a lesson and go through something, you're going to go through it,
Yeah.
right? And there's proof of that even biblically, and people who biblically went through things, right? Even though they had the resources, you look at Job, for example, and still went through. I always say that this experience, this journey, it taught me to trust God, because here's the thing, no matter what, every single day I was able to eat. There were days I woke up with no money, like literally waiting for Friday to get paid from the gym, right? The meager amount that we got paid. We got paid $8 per session we had. So
Oh my
we got
gosh.
we got paid $8 per session. The gym took $32. And they tried to convince us that this was great pay for this area. I'm like, what? I'm like, so how on earth is somebody supposed to survive on that,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. And the thing
And
that you said that just floored me was you were applying and you were
mhm,
working. People think that you become homeless because you weren't trying, that you sat
right,
around all day. That was
right,
not the case. That is
right.
such a misconception.
Right. And
Like,
I say temporary homelessness because there's always that. I heard somebody say sort of insensitively to someone, well, you're not homeless, just go home. Like there's always a home to go to. There's always a family member, or there, and that's not necessarily the case for
no,
everyone. That's not the case for everyone. Sometimes there is no one, right?
that's
In
right.
my case, I was blessed enough. Yes, there was that comfort of knowing that at any moment I could go back to Ohio,
Hmm.
but it was also, again, something deep within me, and that peace that I had through this situation,
Yeah.
knowing that I had to go through this myself in order to learn a very valuable lesson. And
Yeah.
that lesson that I learned from this was to trust God no matter what. When I came back to visit my church, I told them, I said, I thought I trusted God before. I thought I trusted him before, until I went through all of this, And I realized that there were days, one of the stories I say, that there was a day that I was just extremely hungry, right? And some of the sales guys at the gym said, hey, you want to come out to the food truck? We're all getting something to eat, right? And I was like, no, 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 that's all right, because I didn't have anything to get. I didn't have any money. I was waiting till Friday. And just extremely hungry. I had a lot of clients still left. I wanted to work out myself. So I still kept up my daily physical fitness. In spite of all this, I still kept up my daily, well, I was praying a lot and talking to the Lord all throughout the day.
Yeah.
It was a moment I was sitting during lunch at my desk in the gym, and this guy comes into the front desk with all this food in this bag. And he goes up to the front desk and he says in his accent, his thick accent, he says, Timothy, Timothy, eat. And I got scared because I'm like, no, I didn't order anything. I don't have, and I walk up to the front desk and I look at this gentleman and he's like, you, Timothy? And I'm like, yes, I said, no, I didn't order. I said, I don't have any, money. And he says, oh, no worry. He's like, he says, paid for. And I'm like, I almost lost it. Like right there in front of everyone. I'm like floored. And there was like two big, everybody knows how much I love coffee, two big things of coffee. And we're talking several containers filled with food, right? And I didn't know until later that one of my clients back in Ohio just happened to want to surprise me with a meal that day. Wow. And so I'm like, God, you know what? You're proving to me over and over and over again that in the midst of this trial, in the midst of the struggle that I'm going through, that you will always provide for me, that you will always be my provision, that, you know what? I can get through this. I can get through anything. There is nothing that I cannot get through because I know that you're with me. Yeah. And that even when it gets rough, even when it gets almost unbearable and it seems like I'm at my lowest point, which I was, there was such a peace. It was like the Bible says, just joy unspeakable and full of glory, but there's also a peace that passeth all understanding, that it doesn't make sense, right? I told my mom, this was another story, if we still have time. I was walking from the hotel. Well, this was before I built up enough money to get a bike, right? Because when I got my bike, it was such a day of rejoicing. I felt like, I'm moving on up, right? This was before that time. So I walked 3 miles to the closest hotel and the cheapest hotel, and, back and forth. And so early in the morning, it's probably 4 o'clock, I'm walking to get to my first client. And I had to laugh because I told my mom this. I said, I'm walking and all of a sudden I hear thunder. I'm like, great. As soon as I come out of and the buses don't run that early. So people are like, well, why don't you just take, transit? They didn't run before 5. I had to be at work by 5. And I'm walking and all of a sudden there's thunder and it just starts pouring. It was like a deluge and I didn't have an umbrella, and I'm just like, I laughed. I laughed, not like a crazy, but I laughed because I'm like, you know what, God, that's all right. This is cool. I was like, you have a sense of humor. And I told my mom and she's like, oh my goodness. I said, but it was just one of those things where, when it rains, it pours. But I just said, there was still humor in these moments. And the other thing I want to touch on is that just like Job, and I actually started reading Job while I was down there, not to say that my situation could compare to what he went through, but I think there's principles that we can take from that. Just like Job, his friends tried to put the blame on him. I had people who were putting the blame on me. I had people who, when they heard what I was going through, and there's people that are going to hear this and still say, well, you should have done this differently. You should have done this differently. You could have done this. What about doing this? And just like those friends said to Job, you must be doing something incorrectly to wind up in this situation. That's the same thing they said to him.
Yeah.
I was getting that from some family members.
Yeah.
I was getting it from friends.
Yeah.
And I said, and that's what came back to my mind. Like Job's friends said the same thing, but it was nothing he did wrong. Actually, it was things that he did right. Right. He went through that because he was deemed righteous.
Yeah.
And I tell them, I said, I went through this because God needed to reveal something to me. He needed me to grow in a certain way. And I grew. And I grew after that. So, I mean, now I'm like, you could strip everything away from me. Everything. I'm cool. I am cool. And I would still, because of what I went through, right? So that's the peace now and the strength that I have to encourage other people that it's not about materialistic things. It's not about money, right? Too often our mood is attached to how much money we have. It's not about these things that we think that make us secure. Our security has to be in Christ. It has to be in God, right? And so as long as we remain in our faith in him, there is nothing that we cannot overcome. And I overcame that situation. Little by little, we started to build up. And like I said, I was able to do some things and get some more clients online. And I bought a bike and I'm like, okay, then I bought this car that broke down in like a couple months, but I bought another car that broke down in a couple months. And then I realized when I moved back to Ohio, finally, I learned my lesson. I was like, I'm not getting any of these like, for sale $2,000 cars. I was like, I'm going to a dealer. I'm going to make payments on something that actually is going to be somewhat reliable. It taught me to trust. And, God brought me back here to Ohio. I believe I was down there about 6 months, and I told my church family up here, I said, sometimes you go through a course, a full semester, 2 semesters in college, and then you go through, sometimes you'll choose to do summer school. And the summer classes are accelerated. They jam literally a whole semester into those sometimes 6 weeks, right? And I said, well, what happened to me while I was in Florida is that God took me through an accelerated course. He took me through an accelerated course in trust. If I had it to do all over again, I would go right back through that entire situation because it was that important for me to learn to trust him that much, that none of that I went through, some of those hungry nights and hungry mornings and days where you had a dime literally in your pocket. I would go through it again to learn what I learned.
Yeah.
And the realness of that.
Oh, just hearing that you keep using the word peace, that you had so much peace. You had that peace that whole time.
Yes.
I wrote down on here, was there ever a time that you got mad at God for testing you? Or you really did feel like this was it? Like, this is what, because I went through a dark season and I'm not going to lie, I was a little mad at God. Yeah. I use the same comparison, not that my life was as tough as what Job's was, but I felt the same way. I felt like I was being challenged in every way possible. I got a little mad.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I remember one time, and I don't cry often, and my mom always jokes and says, I've never seen Tim cry. And little does she know, I cry usually when I'm rejoicing, right? When I'm praising God and when there's tears of joy. I was talking to a then friend of mine, I don't know what happened, but a then friend of mine who actually blessed me with a full week of a hotel stay. But so this how God was working, right? And which I would have never accepted before. Like, no, you're not doing this. But through this situation and humility, you learn to receive, because I learned to receive other people's blessings because that allows them to be blessed by God. And if I say no and reject it, then I'm rejecting their opportunity to receive more blessings from God. And so that's how this whole circle of blessings continue, is that if someone wants to bless you, you receive it, and thank them. And then God continues to bless them, right?
That's good.
So anyway, I was talking to her on the phone on my way walking to work one day, and I broke down. And this is from, the whole macho, thing, don't cry in front of women. It's just this stereotypical, and I'm not really all that kind of like, dogmatic in a sense. But I'm talking to her on the phone, and I remember what I said. I cried tears because I said, I just want to help people. That's what made me cry.
Yeah.
I said, because I felt like I was in a position that I said, I'm like, God, you're tying my hands. How can I help other people if I have nothing to offer them? And I felt like that. And I it came out. It was just like the floodwaters. I said, all I want to do is help people. That's it. Like, that's my desire. That's my goal. That's why we're here, to help each other,
Yep.
not to help ourselves and serve ourselves, is to help other people. And so that's that point, that day, that hit me. That hit me hard. And so, but she was there to kind of listen and comfort and say, you know what, it's all right. Just let it out, you know? And after that, I mean, it was, you know, I don't believe, and I don't know, I don't remember that I was really, there were any other days that I was like, God, why did you let me go through this? It's like, it was just every single day I woke up with peace. And I tell people that, you know, obviously without a relationship, we can have happiness.
Yeah.
We can have happiness. Anybody can have happiness. That's based on the moment. It's based on the situation. It's based on temporal things, temporary things. But joy is something that it stays with us regardless of the situation.
Yeah.
And I was telling one of my friends recently, I said, joy can manifest in different ways.
Yeah.
And so I said, my joy was manifesting as this sense of peace through this situation.
Yeah.
So that's why I said, because I wasn't necessarily happy. I'm not dancing in the streets that I don't have anywhere to live and I don't have a vehicle, and no one's dancing because of that or rejoicing because of that. But the joy manifested as this sense of peace, knowing that if I just keep going forward every single day, things are going to get better.
Yeah. And they did.
They did.
They improved from that situation.
Oh my goodness, a lot. A
Yeah.
lot. So now to as we sit here today, as you can see, I'm not in a car, right?
Yeah.
I am about to launch yet another business that I've had the money to invest in, right, by myself as sole owner, while also having started a film company, which was again another investment.
Ooh.
And
I got goosebumps.
and teaching classes locally. Also, my online clients have grown since then. So it's like we went from basically almost nothing, I'll say, to 4 things, with more things planned and more things on the way. And now it's I'm at a place where, you know, okay, I have discretionary income. If I want to go out and do something and take a trip, I can do that, right? And I'm working on, you know, steadily, you know, and your thing, you know, paying off those student loans and things of that nature, and just really putting myself in a better place each day, each week, making sound financial decisions, investing, and feeling like at a place where I'm like, not only can I help people financially, but now I can help them with this story. I can help them with the things that I learned from going through this, so that when they tell me that they don't know if they can go on, I can encourage them and let them know that if you're still breathing, that means that God has a plan for you, right? Jeremiah 29:11, for I know the plans that I have for you.
Yeah.
And so it's just to remember that, you know, to remember
Do you think
that.
knowing that God had a plan for you helped you get through that, and that's what gave you that peace?
For sure. Knowing that, I mean, all the promises come back, right? When you're going through, it's like pain. When you're going through pain, you remember the promises, right? Or you should remember the promises. Like, and we know Romans 8, and we know that all things work together for the good to them that love God, to them who are the called according to His purpose.
Yeah.
You know, and I remember that Lamentations 3 is one of my favorite passages, 21 through 23, where it says, "This I recall to my mind. Therefore," and I quote from King James because that's what I remember as a kid. "Therefore have I hope. It is of the Lord's mercies that we are not consumed, because his compassions, his love, they don't fail. They are new every morning. And it says, great is thy faithfulness, right? And I mean, just all these promises that I will never leave you nor forsake you. No weapon formed against you in Isaiah 54:17 shall prosper. I mean, just all these things and that's what the Spirit of God reminds us of his promises, right?
Were those verses just playing through your mind during this?
Oh yeah.
During this
Oh
time?
yeah.
That,
all the time. Yeah.
That was your anchor, really.
For sure. For sure. And so many more. And just remembering, look, Job got through it, and Job was blessed more after, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's not saying being insensitive to what he went through and the pain he went through early on, but he was blessed with so much more, exponentially more after what he went through.
Yeah.
And on top of the sort of temporal, right, the physical blessings, he had even a much better blessing. He had a deeper understanding of who God is and a deeper relationship. And that's something you can't buy. You have to learn that.
You learn it. And like you said, you learned, I wrote down trust and peace. You learned to trust God during this. Something that was meant probably to crush, right. There could have been things thrown at you from the enemy and things that would have just derailed most people.
Right.
That would have just stopped them in their tracks. But you kept pushing forward every day. And like you said, it's your smile. You still did it every day with that smile because your joy wasn't found in a material item. It wasn't found in a home.
Right.
It was found in just helping people and living out what you were created to do. Like you said, you were just crying because you wanted to help people. That right there just shows your heart. It does. So I wrote down a couple of questions here. What advice would you give to a younger version of yourself? Is there something out there that you want to share?
I would say, don't be afraid to take risks. Don't be afraid to take risks. Take the risk, especially when you're young, because you'll have time to recover if they're not the right decision. Seek out, I would say, wise counsel. And I think that's something that, especially in the inner city, is missing. And not necessarily in terms of the home, but I'm in terms of things like college and career paths.
And that's completely biblical. I mean, it is mentioned over and over to seek wise counsel. I think people are afraid. I think they're afraid to reach out and to find that mentor or a counselor or just somebody a few steps ahead of them that they can, run ideas by and ask questions. But right there, God says in his word, that's what we should be doing.
Right. That's right.
One of the questions I have on here is, if you owned a billboard and you could write anything on it, what message would you share with the world?
Yeah, this is something I've been thinking about a lot, given the current situation of what we're going through and so many different issues and social injustices and feelings of angst. And you see so many hurtful messages on social media toward different people and different, ethnicities and people of different orientations. And my message that I would say maybe was even birthed out of my situation back in Florida is that we need to remember we are all a family and that we all need to love each other more.
Oh, right there. That's it. Because we are.
That's right.
We are all God's children.
Yeah. And
his children, your siblings, and we're family. Oh my, I was writing that down because that right there, we're family. Yeah. And I feel that being around you, you are able to pour this love into people. I can't tell you enough how much of an impact you've made in my life, because it is that smile. It's knowing you went through seasons of struggle, but you still love. And no matter being hurt or not hurt, you don't give up on people, and you encourage them every single day, even though they might not know what you're going through.
Right.
So where can people connect with you online? Where can they find you? Where can they follow your journey? Where can they learn more about your businesses? Where can they see your light? Where can they connect with you?
Yeah, there's several places, but
No,
I
yeah,
think that
share them all, please.
there's so many. Um, the easiest, go on Instagram
Mhm.
and type in Coach Tim Heath, all one word. If you go there, you'll see in my profile links to all of my other sort of interests and businesses. So you'll see my link to my fitness business, my film production. Coming soon, there'll be a link for the healthy snack shop that we're opening, and so much more. So you'll see all of that at Coach Tim Heath on Instagram, and then you can go from there. So that'll link to like YouTube and all things of that nature. So yeah.
Yeah, and you're on all the platforms, which is great because
Mm-hmm.
it means
Mm-hmm.
you're just sharing God's word. You're sharing it
Mm-hmm.
out there, and people need this. People need this in their lives, and that's why I'm just so thankful that you came on.
Yeah.
What was meant to do, sometimes what's meant to test and destroy, you just came
Mm-hmm.
out of so much stronger on the other side, trusting and having peace. And
That's right.
maybe some people will hear this story and think, if he can get up and if he can keep having that relationship with God and he can have that smile on his face every single day, I can do that too. So,
That's right.
well,
Amen.
thank you
Amen.
so much.
You're welcome. Thank you. Thank you for having me. And I hope to maybe be on again in the future, maybe a different topic. There's so much that, I have to say, how preachers are.
I
So,
know. Well,
but
we had to pinpoint it down today to get you
I
on here
know.
for the intro, but I know you have messages to share and we will soak up your wisdom every chance that we can.
Okay. Awesome.
All right.
Awesome. Well,
Thank
thank you
you.
so much. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for checking out this episode of the From Hurt to Hope podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please feel free to subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss any upcoming interviews and episodes. Thank you so much, and we will see you guys again soon.